So there are more questions than answers that are coming out of this. But this is insane. The lies, the lies, the lies, the lies. And page 6, you just got busted.
It began with a whisper, just past midnight, like the scent of perfume clinging to an empty room. There was no thunderclap, no urgent alert from Buckingham or Hollywood. Just a quiet headline, slipped into the bloodstream of the internet with the precision of a soft cell. At 12:03 a.m. Pacific Time, page 6 hit publish. It was the kind of hour when inboxes go still and newsroom lights dim, when the city's pulse slows to a hush and only the bleary-eyed remain. Airport janitors wiping down arrival gates, PR assistants pulling one last espresso shot, celebrity handlers fielding late-night texts that read more like damage control than strategy. The headline didn't scream. It cooed. Meghan Markle hands out handwritten notes on a commercial flight. A single sentence, wrapped in gentleness. No all-caps hysteria.
I don't ask for very much. I mean, if you're gonna lie, can you please do it so well that we don't know we've been lied to?
No exclamation points. It didn't demand your attention. It invited it. Like a candle in a fogged-out room, it flickered with intentional restraint. But beneath that glow lived something potent, a constructed serenity, the kind PR veterans call preemptive warmth. The headline wasn't designed to break the internet. It was designed to reframe the story, to introduce a new act for a public figure whose narrative had lately been circling the drain. The subtext was unmistakable. Elegance, humility, grace. A duchess grounded, literally. A woman once vilified for alleged extravagance, now seen passing paper hearts at 35,000 feet. It was redemption in lowercase. A gentle pivot from the optics of Montecito luxury to something more populist, more palatable. Here was Meghan, the people's passenger, offering handwritten tokens of appreciation in the economy class cabin of American Airlines. It didn't matter whether she sat in 2A or 23B. The symbolism soared. And it soared fast, because by 12:17 a.m., it had been screenshotted. By 12:34, it was on Instagram fan pages.
Or at least use people that are more convincing, because if this is the kind of people that American Airlines is employing, don't forget that Meghan Markle is Mrs. Privacy. Rachel Meghan Markle is privacy.
By 1:11, TikTok clips were dissecting the phrasing. And by 2 a.m., Meghan's name was trending on Twitter, not for controversy, but for kindness. The speed was startling. Like a spark across dry brush, the story ignited on contact. What no one realized, not then, not yet, was that the flame had no center. That beneath the warmth of the moment was a hollow space, a silence that would soon grow louder than the applause. Within hours, social media lit up, not in unison, but in fracture. It didn't spread like a wave. It cracked like glass, splintering into 1,000 interpretations. On one end of the spectrum were the loyalists, digital disciples of the Sussex narrative, who reposted the headline with a kind of reverent joy, punctuating every share with doves, hearts, and crown emojis. Their captions read like affirmations. She's so real. This is why we love her. True class doesn't need cameras. To them, the image of Meghan handing out handwritten notes mid-flight wasn't just a nice gesture. It was a spiritual sequel to Diana's whispered grace, proof that the monarchy's gentlest legacy had found its true heir outside the palace gates. But the affection didn't blanket the discourse. Just beneath the warm layer of praise, there was a chill, skeptics who had seen this choreography before. Media watchdogs and casual cynics alike began raising their digital eyebrows.
So, Meghan Markle puts this woman up to do this, gives her a handwritten note, because we of course know that Princess Diana used to be a huge she used to handwrite notes, thank you notes all the time, and thank letters. So even in that, she has to copy Princess Diana. It's quite creepy, actually, you know?
Some called the story convenient, others crafted. The phrase obviously planted gained traction by the hour, retweeted across timelines with an undercurrent of weary recognition. A few cited the story source, page 6, a publication known less for investigative rigor than for its transactional proximity to celebrity teams. Others pointed to the lack of specifics. No seat number, no flight time, no photos taken by fellow passengers. For a world addicted to real-time documentation, the absence felt conspicuous. And then came the mockery. Parody accounts seized on the aesthetic of the story. The glowing Duchess in coach, the heartfelt notes passed like blessings and pushed it into absurdity. One viral tweet featured a fake image of Meghan balancing on the wing of a plane, Sharpie in hand, captioned, "Meghan Markle personally writes a thank you card to the wind." Another imagined her descending into the cargo, hold to hug each piece of luggage. TikTok creators stitched fake reenactments with orchestral scores, turning the flight into an Oscar-bait biopic in miniature. In the space of 6 hours, the gesture had mutated.
Please, I beg of you, Meghan, please lie better, because now this flight attendant is now taking it back. She's confiding in sources in France to say that she actually didn't really serve Meghan Markle, that she never saw her.
No longer a simple act of kindness, but a Rorschach test for the internet's collective appetite for authenticity, irony, and spectacle. By 5 a.m., the hashtag Meghan flight was trending globally. Not because the story was confirmed or discredited, but because it had become a meme, a myth, a moment so photogenic, so emotionally calibrated, that it demanded to be either exalted or dismantled. There was no middle ground left. And somewhere in that cacophony, between the fan art and the fact checks, the parodies and the praise, a single note began to hum, low and persistent, like interference under a polished broadcast. Something doesn't add up. Not yet a scandal. Not quite a lie. But a presence like static in the signal, hinting, even then, that the story's perfection might be precisely what would unravel it. The original story read like a prestige TV script polished for a feel-good finale, the kind of soft focus closer that rolls just before the credits, cueing a swell of strings and a single tear sliding down the cheek of a nation still unsure whether to applaud or interrogate. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, long accused of excessive tastes and royal-blooded detachment, was recast as something altogether more digestible, a frequent flyer in flats. The narrative opened with restraint but dripped with symbolism. She had allegedly foregone her usual private jet, a mode of travel that, in recent years, had made her the poster child for celebrity climate hypocrisy.
So I'm not sure if you've caught up on this week's episode of Confessions of a Female Founder, but it's such a good one. And it reminds me of that quote, "Wherever you go, there you are." That is what my conversation with Cassie is like, because 20 plus years later, so much has changed, and yet we are so much the same.
And instead boarded a humble American Airlines flight from Los Angeles to New York. No fanfare, no entourage, no security detail, detailed in the telling. Just Meghan, a woman alone in a cabin full of strangers, moving not like a duchess or a starlet, but like a balm, soothing, effortless human. According to the now-deleted TikTok from a flight attendant who appeared young, wide-eyed, and earnestly overwhelmed, Meghan didn't merely board and sit. She engaged. She complimented nails. She smiled, made eye contact, radiated what the attendant described as a sort of celestial warmth. Most importantly, she passed out handwritten thank you notes to members of the crew. The detail was exquisite in its simplicity. Not a publicist-drafted email, not a sleek gift bag, but paper, pen, ink, humanity. It was the kind of gesture that, at least on the surface, required no context, only admiration. A duchess in the sky, pausing to acknowledge the labor of those who served her. The act was modest, but the implications weren't. In an era when viral fame often comes packaged in outrage, the image of Meghan offering handwritten gratitude suggested not just kindness, but restraint, recalibration, redemption. And in its economy, it was cinematic.
So I hope you get a chance to watch. And in the spirit of memory lane, here are some behind-the-scenes videos from the making of our photo shoot for Confessions of a Female Founder.
It invited visuals. You could see her gliding down the aisle, a silk scarf grazing her shoulder, a note pressed gently into the palm of a surprised flight attendant. You could imagine the smell of ink on thick cardstock, the curve of her handwriting. perhaps a small crown doodled in the corner. The whole thing felt storyboard. One part rom-com sincerity, one part crown-light mystique. It wasn't just believable, it was shareable. Which was the point. This wasn't simply a story. It was a moment tailor-made for digital virality. Bite-sized, benevolent, and morally frictionless. The kind of anecdote you could send to your group chat, your mother, your boss, without fear of judgment. It was the kind of image that could mend a public narrative in under 280 characters. And for a while it did. And that virality came right on cue. It didn't just happen. It landed with the precision of a well-timed monologue in the third act of a scripted drama. In the ecosystem of modern celebrity, where narrative control is both currency and survival, the timing wasn't just fortunate. It was strategic perfection. Meghan's media presence, once white-hot with post-palace intrigue, had begun to dim. The appetite was still there, but the servings had grown stale. Her Spotify deal, the much-hyped, multi-million-dollar partnership meant to showcase her voice in the literal sense, had unraveled with a muffled thud. Creative differences, they said, but insiders spoke of missed deadlines, dwindling enthusiasm, and a format that never quite fit. On Netflix, the glow had similarly cooled.
So when you see her just talking, saying that, oh, Cassie and I have been together for 20 years. Let's watch the behind the scenes of our podcast. You assume Cassie's going to be there. Where is Cassie? Cassie's nowhere to be found.
The docuseries that once drew global eyes with its behind-the-curtain promise had given way to lukewarm follow-ups. A nature doc here, a children's animation there, all met with polite shrugs rather than buzz. Even Archewell, the philanthropic engine that was supposed to power Meghan and Harry's post-royal legacy, seemed to be stalling, its initiatives trailing off, its brand voice muted, its once rallying call to action fading into digital clutter. In PR terms, the Sussex machine was adrift in what insiders call a cold cycle, a lull between controlled narratives, where silence becomes dangerous and attention migrates elsewhere. It's the space where reputations erode, where old controversies get recycled for clicks, and where powerful people grow uneasy. And then came handwritten Meghan. The timing was not just convenient. It was curative. Into this vacuum of momentum and meaning came a story light enough to float and sweet enough to seduce. No scandal, no agenda, just ink and kindness and eye contact at cruising altitude. It was an anecdote designed to reset the emotional tone, to reintroduce Meghan not as a struggling producer or embattled brand builder, but as the woman people once rallied behind, graceful, thoughtful, real. Like a fragrance ad dropped between scandals, the moment arrived with soft lighting and soft focus. A reminder of a persona that once captured the global imagination, not through controversy, but through curated authenticity. It didn't need to roar. It needed only to whisper, "She's still her." And for a brief, flickering moment, it worked. Then, like the first shiver before a fever breaks,
Cassie is, I don't know where's Cassie. Do you? So no, once again, Meghan Markle lied to us. This wasn't a backstage of Cassie being with her friend of 20 years because none of the people that she interviewed were actually there.
Came the pushback. A French tabloid, known more for scandalous headlines and doctored paparazzi than for any pretense of journalistic rigor, published a quietly damning piece that shifted the tone of the narrative. At first glance, it looked like background noise, the kind of imported media static that rarely pierces the American entertainment cycle. But this one landed differently. Buried inside the breezy paragraphs of gossip and speculation was a single quote, anonymous, offhand, but explosive. The outlet claimed to have reconnected with the same TikTok flight attendant who had launched the story into orbit. Only this time her tune had changed. According to the tabloid source, the attendant now insisted she had never actually seen Meghan Markle on the flight. Not even in passing. No sighting. No confirmation. Just an assumption. Passed on, repeated, and amplified until it took on the weight of fact. There were no selfies, which in 2025 is not just strange, it's suspicious. Celebrity sightings on commercial flights are social currency, and a duchess and coach would be photographic gold. No blurry snaps. No subtle seatmate photos, accidentally revealing her in the background. Nothing. Stranger still, there were no royal protection officers noted by crew or passengers. For someone still considered a high-profile security risk, Meghan would not be permitted to fly without some form of protection. And yet, no one recalled any agents, any protocol, any telltale signs that a globally recognized public figure had been on board. Then came the final erasure. The TikTok itself was gone, scrubbed from the account without comment or explanation. No archived version, no screenshot apology, no attempt at clarification. It was as if the entire episode had slipped into that peculiar corner of the internet where suspiciously polished stories go to vanish, the same digital ether where aspirational PR posts disappear when the timeline turns, where celebrity engagements are erased before split announcements, where authentic moments go to die when they become too fragile to hold up under scrutiny. And just like that, the thing that had sparked 1,000 shares and news segments evaporated. No video, no first-hand account. Just a growing silence, and the gnawing feeling that what had seemed spontaneous might have been scripted. Or worse, fictionalized. More troubling still, perhaps more revealing than any missing witness or vanished TikTok, was the photograph. It had accompanied the Page 6 article like punctuation, an elegant, grounding image to anchor the sweetness of the story. Meghan, poised at the top of an aircraft stairway, descending with the practiced grace of someone who had once learned to navigate both red carpets and royal ceremonies. She wore a stylish camel trench, perfectly belted, her hair falling in effortless waves, her smile subtle but sure. It was the kind of image that told a story without words, a visual that said, "Here she is." She really flew. For casual readers, it worked. There was no caption caveat, no credit line explaining the image's age or origin.
So it's like, does she think that we are dumb? I mean, she really is offending our intelligence at this point in time, Meghan Markle. You know, it's like, please stop it. Don't do that.
To the untrained eye, it was a recent candid. Proof, or at least implication, that the Duchess had indeed taken flight. Commercial, humble, gracious. For a while, no one questioned it. Not the story's framing, not the photo, not the quiet power of suggestion that comes when an article drops a single image into your feed and lets your imagination do the rest. But online sleuths did what they do best. Within hours, digital detectives across Reddit, Twitter, and a dozen niche forums began cross-referencing the image. The trench coat caught someone's attention. Too familiar. The lighting felt off. The aircraft behind her wasn't American Airlines at all, but a private charter jet with a now-defunct livery. One user ran a reverse image search. Another pulled archived Getty image sets. Within minutes, the truth surfaced. The photo wasn't new. It wasn't even recent. It was from 2016, cropped from an old Getty series captured during a trip Meghan made years before her royal wedding. Years before Archewell, before the Sussex titles, before the narrative had even begun. The coat, the stairs, the lighting. It all came from a different era. But the Page 6 article had offered it without context, as though it belonged to the moment, as if it had been taken at the exact time of her alleged thank you note flight. There was no correction, no update, just the sudden, jarring realization that the image, central to the believability of the story, was part of a borrowed past, and that, perhaps, the story itself had been built on that same kind of scaffolding, familiar, beautiful, but ultimately misleading. Once the timestamp cracked, the narrative began to unspool. What had seemed effortless began to feel orchestrated. What had passed as sincerity began to resemble staging. And the more closely people looked, the more the story sagged under its own weight, not because it was a scandal, but because it was too perfect for its own good.